and it looked like something with a freaking hood on, with glowing white eyes. So I've come to the conclusion, and I'm willing to stand on this conclusion, that when you are in contact with, whether it be a Bigfoot or a dogman or a cryptid entity, there is something else there, and there's always something else there with it. 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 Now, let me say this to the audience who's listening. Most people think that it's a negative thing when you see this type of stuff. If you look at it the right way, you're in a phenomenal position because you are no longer a normie. You're not locked into the traditional context which everybody else is locked in. So you're outside of the realm of thinking of everybody else. And once you learn how to manage it and move around in it, you actually are more powerful than the average person. The average person will brush that off. Well, you know that weird, crazy stuff happens, so you give it the attention it deserves and pay attention when you're supposed to. And that's the gift of the paranormal at a time like this in the world that we live in right now.
Welcome back to Blurry Creatures. We are bringing on another...
Back to the show. Back to the show.
Back to the show.
Part 2.
Dark Waters, DW. Yeah, the first time he came on, Luke, we had a good time with him. We talked about giants in the bayou.
The Hoodoo Swamp. It's going on down in New Orleans, and you guys have been asking for him to return, and we put out the bat signal, and Dark Waters has returned.
We had a fabulous conversation, talked about dogman, cryptids, and it got real spiritual. It was cool. I mean, I think he touched on a lot of things that I think people have been emailing us about our show, just like this blend of paranormal and relating it to the Bible and being willing to like speak out against the darkness. And yeah, we just had a great conversation with him, so I like this one.
Yeah, and I think he's somebody who is in the mix and in the trenches and has his ear to the ground, and he's one of those unique folks who is a hub for the people reach out to. In some ways, we get a lot of that too, Nate, but people reach out to him and tell him their weird stories, and decide to have him on.
We get some of it, but we don't have like a hotline. You know, maybe we need to get the Blurry Creature hotline.
Make that hotline bling.
But yeah. So the cool thing about Dark Waters is, he gets off the cuff, and he can kind of just say how it is. People who just speak from their heart and speak honest and speak frankly. It's always fun to talk to someone like that.
Yeah.
So let's get Dark Waters on the show.
The history of our Earth is so different from what we can imagine.
The Smithsonian, that if they found out about a large skeleton somewhere, was to go get it.
I'm going to assume at least one person is right, because if one person's right, it busts the paradigm.
It all goes back to the fallen cherub. And the problem with the modern day church, they have a very truncated view of the supernatural.
This backdrop that's just pregnant with all kinds of meaning associated with this Mount Hermon event.
Welcome to Blurry Creatures.
And this guy defects from the kingdom. That's a big deal.
Just so you know, DW, we had people asking you to come back on. They're like, we got to bring back Dark Waters. That episode was so great. So here we are.
Yeah, last time we had a great episode. We talked about the giants in the
swamp,
in the bayou.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, we were talking about Hoodoo Swamp. Yeah, that's that wild stuff. I was actually down in that area. I went fishing. I was down in that area not too long ago, like a week and a half ago. I was over in that area. But I wasn't near the Hoodoo Swamp. You got to go way off into the swamp to get to it. But I was down where you need to go to launch to go into that area. But yeah, that's way down
outskirts.
There. But that's that scary stuff, man.
Yeah. Well, welcome back to the show. Thanks for coming back on the Blurry Creatures.
I love being with creatures that are blurry, bro. It's fun hanging out with you guys, man.
Yeah, they are blurry. Yeah, but you try to put some focus on those creatures, don't you?
I try my best, We tried to do the Dogman Camps project. That didn't work because people were just like stealing and sharing passcodes. So I was like, I'm not going to lose money so y'all could try and find Dogman. But what we did do was, man, we captured a lot of evidence. And, there's this speculation about, cryptids, like, can they see infrared light? Well, we know for a fact that they can see infrared light because that camera project had 4 cameras with IR night vision, and they would just like walk up and stare at the cameras, and you would see the eye shine out in the open. We actually caught one that came up to a tree, and you could see it moving its mouth, moving its head left to right. Like, we caught a lot of evidence. The only issue with the project was people just, they wouldn't stop stealing. So I was like, screw that. I'm not going to lose money so you guys can steal. So, but it was a great thing. We confirmed IR light. We confirmed that cryptids definitely get aggravated when you light fires anywhere in their presence. We also confirmed infrasound, which is what people kind of talk about, how animals growl at you. That infrasound, when you're hit with it, because one of my researchers just recently was hit with infrasound, and he started off feeling groggy and sleepy, and then he said he had previously had heart attacks. So he's like, man, it felt like how I felt recovering from a heart attack. I was just super duper tired. He ended up having to sleep 20 hours to get over being hit with that sound. 20 hours, which is crazy.
What was you saying the dogman was making the sound, or was it a different cryptid? Or?
It was either dogman or Bigfoot. I'm leaning towards Bigfoot this time, but the research area had activity from both. And he went off into the woods. He had 2 smaller beings with kind of like greenish eyes in front of him. And then there was a huge one to his right that like was walking and stumping in. You know how like when you were a kid, you did something wrong, your mama was mad, she'll come stumping into the room? Well, that's what he described it like. He's like, I think the 2 in front of me were juveniles and they were trying to see what was going on. The reason why everything came in is because he was call blasting like coyote sounds and injured deer sounds. So all these cryptids came in on him. The 2 smaller ones were the ones he was focused on until he started hearing that stumping coming in on him from the right-hand side. And then he got hit with that sound. Hair stood up on the back of his neck. He got afraid. And this dude is never afraid. Like, this dude is like, bro, I'm like, bro, there's something over there. Go inside. He's like, nah, I'm going to stay outside. This time he went inside because it shocked his body to the core. And that's what happens to a lot of people who have these encounters. Wow. They get hit with something that spooks and startles them, and they don't even understand why they're feeling that fear, but you're getting hit with that infrasound, which it literally, for all my research, it goes in, and the vibrations it's very dangerous because the vibration will shake any plaque that's loose in your arteries, and then that plaque starts riding up through your body, and if you got anywhere for there to be a blood clot, it'll form it because that's how strong that vibration is from those growls.
And this is low frequency, right?
Yep.
This is like low.
Yep. Ultra low.
Super low. Like
is this in Texas?
That happened in Mississippi.
Where's this happened?
That happened in Mississippi.
Okay.
I
know because we get all over, right? In the bayou, there's a lot of different places happening, but this happened out in Mississippi.
This happened in Mississippi, where we have been doing all the research, where all the cameras were set up. Well, we have been doing like public investigations on live streams where people, and this is the beauty of what we were able to do. Like, we were able to capture screams and hollers on live stream live, where people were like, yo, like, I'm in the middle of talking and you hear something holler and scream. You're like, what the hell is that? So it was an amazing thing. It's an amazing project, but it just wouldn't work because of the way people were behaving.
TW, do you think that, when people say they can sense Bigfoot, and like people often describe that something was looking at them, do you think that has something to do with infrasound or something completely different? Because it feels like I've heard so many people say that something was watching me, and I've never felt that before.
Well, it's 2 things. One of them is, I think, primal instincts. It's no different than when you're riding in a car, right? And the person, like, you're sitting at a red light, and the person next to you is staring at you, but you're not paying attention, but you feel them staring. Those are some of our primal instincts that we have left over as humans. Like, it's just that instinct we have where we can feel those things, those other senses that we don't use because we're in a modern world today, and there's no reason to use them.
Right.
Well, you take yourself and drop a human being in the middle of the woods, a hunter, a fisherman, anybody, and now you don't have those distractions of a cell phone, and now you're back to nature where you actually belong. Those instincts are heightened, and so those primal instincts kick in. That, and then also I feel that, and I feel is not the word, I believe, it's probably a better word to use. I believe that from like a genetic standpoint, like a genetic imprint. We genetically have a imprint of like a genetic fear of some of these things because they've been around as long as we have. And so genetically, deep down in your core, you know when something's off. I can attest to it. Like I went fishing the other day and I'm out down by Grand Isle. I went off on Highway 1. It's like 4:45 in the morning. I'm out there fishing. Everything is cool. Like it's copacetic. And then all of a sudden, it's like, yo, something's here. Like you could feel it. Like the whole environment changed, everything changed. And I just said, okay, buddy, you can have the fish. Put my fishing rod up and got in the car and rode up the street to the little diner, got me some coffee, waited till the sun came up, went back fishing. But I knew something was there. I could feel something watching me. Now, was it a Bigfoot? Was it a dogman? Was it some kind of spirit? Was it a person? I don't know what the hell it was, but it was there and I felt it. And I knew to respond to it. And the only response I could have was, flight. I wasn't nothing for me to fight because I couldn't see nothing. So I got the hell out of there.
It makes you wonder because a lot of times, some of those Bigfoot encounters, people say it's like they walk into a wall of like there's no sound. They can't hear anything. And then they have this crazy fear. And it just makes you wonder if that infrasound that you're talking about is something that they can put out.
We know that the infrasound is something that they can put out, but also that bubble of sound, that sound bubble where it's like the dead silence, I believe that sound bubble is every other animal in the environment knowing that something is going on because they have better senses than we do in many cases. Like when I had my dogman encounter in Taylor, Mississippi, the crows knew something was coming long before we knew something was coming. They were just squawking and squawking and squawking like, hey, idiots, y'all might want to leave. Y'all might want to leave. Then one crow was squawking. He left. Then the other one stuck around a little while longer. Then he left. Then seconds after those crows left, it sounded like freaking the Chicago Bears, the 88 Chicago Bears with Refrigerator Perry were running down on us. You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah, crows will do that. I had chickens, and the crows they would go crazy whenever a hawk would come by every time, and they would warn you. It's funny, yeah. It's like they're all communicating in their own way, and we're just like you said, we're too modern. We don't understand what's going on. We don't use those senses.
Nope. And that reminds me of a story that a guy was telling me. This was right before I got on the plane to come here. So today is what, Monday? So that was Friday evening. Yeah. And we're talking about his paranormal encounter. And he was trying to explain to me the significance of birds. And I was like, well, I kind of understand the significance of birds. And I said, tell me your encounter. He was like, well, at my old house, he said I was having all this paranormal activity where it was furniture moving, bed shaking at night, lamps turning off and on. And so he went through this process of trying to cleanse the house by praying. And he was like, bro, I had a big bay window in front of the house. And he said, I'm sitting by the bay window reading the Bible. And he said, these birds, these little small blackbirds came, not crows, but little small like blackbirds came flying into the window, but they came like as a spiral, like literally like they spiraled in like a corkscrew. Like they were trying to drill through the window. They pop, 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 hit the window. And then they fell, got back up, and all flew away. And I was like, well, what were you praying for at that moment? And he was like, well, I was praying for God to send me a sign that everything was going to be all right in my house. And I was like, okay, so you think that was a sign? And he was like, well, days later, everything kind of stopped and I didn't have any more activity. So when we start talking about animals in the spiritual realm, and you have to believe that there's a spiritual side to Dogman and Bigfoot, and people don't believe that, I can definitely go into that for you. But when we start talking about the spiritual realm, animals have a strong connection to the spiritual realm. And we as human beings, we've lost the understanding of how they connect to the spiritual realm, just like we ignore their connections to the physical realm. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's a hurricane coming in and all the birds leave, which we've seen that, and I'm from New Orleans, we see that all the time. When a hurricane's coming, you will look in the sky and see just flocks and flocks of birds leaving. So we've lost some of that stuff. And unfortunately, we might be forced to get some of it back. We'll see how it goes.
I think we talked about that on one episode, that birds can sense magnetic fields, Luke. Didn't we talk about that?
Yeah, we did. And I think it's interesting. I haven't thought about that a lot, like D-Dub, like with the idea that before natural disasters, like the animals know. You talk about like tsunamis and fish start jumping out of the ocean onto the beach, like weird stuff where they know so far ahead of us that things are off, right? And then you think about with even like pets and the idea, and it's contested. I know that we've talked about on the show a couple of times, Nate, about how, can pets see stuff in the spiritual realm, like when you have, supernatural or paranormal stuff happening in your house. Talk about like cats and dogs and pets being able to see things that aren't there. We've come through about 90 plus episodes of our show, and it started out with us trying to figure out what Bigfoot was. And I think, at least I'm at the point, I think Nate's the same way, that we realize that we think there's something there's supernatural, you like that term, hate that term, whatever it is, attached to Bigfoot. And because of the weirdness of the encounters, the disappearing, the benevolent, and then also the sort of the evil aspect, there's just too much weird things surrounding it for just to be like a regular animal, like a big ape for whatever reason walking around. Like, it doesn't fit. So I find the connection between the animal world, even the things you were talking about, like where we have these senses we've lost in some ways, maybe because we're agrarian and agricultural society, and we've lost sort of these heightened senses, that we'd had as hunters, or even the mind speak stuff with Bigfoot, where, people say they can hear him speak in your head, and then but you can't really return it. There's tons of weird stuff, I think, that's wrapped up in that. And yeah, I think that's fascinating. The bird thing is interesting. Like the idea that like you're praying for a sign and then all these animals hit a wall. It is almost like that God put up a wall in this guy's house to keep out. It seemed like and when I'm listening to it, it sounds very much like a representation or a sign of what was happening in that space, that things weren't going to get in. I don't know how he sussed that out, but it's what it sounded like to me.
I can share one more thing with you. So let's go back to the concept of Bigfoot, dogman, cryptids, and the spiritual aspect of them. And I can send you guys photographic evidence of this to prove it from that Dogman Cams project. So we go through this phase where we have live streaming cameras, about 150 members that are on the cameras. Majority of those people are on cams late at night, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, right? Well, there's this chick named Wendy Wilson. Wendy has had a lot of Bigfoot activity on her property. She's very, very good at seeing Bigfoots on camera. So she starts sending me these photos. Clear Bigfoot faces and heads, and clear, like you can see it, like brows and nose. And the problem with that evidence is that, there's a certain segment of the community that's always going to call it pareidolia, but whatever. I don't even care. Well, she pointed out something else to me. And she said, James, when you look at pictures of Bigfoot, I've looked at hundreds of them that I've taken on my property. You need to look in the peripherals to see what else you see. And so she sent me a photo with this other thing circled. And I swear to God, it looked like a freaking demon. Then you go up above that other thing, and it looked like something with a freaking hood on with glowing white eyes. So I shrink the pictures down to small, like just, how you close your window on your screen, then I open it back up so my eyes can refocus on it. I see the Bigfoot head clearly there. It's a side profile. You can see everything. I look over, see the damn demon thing. Look over, see the other freaking demon looking thing. So I said, okay, let me look at this thing's eyes and see the feeling that I get. Man, I'm sitting there looking at it. I said, oh, hell no, that's real. You could literally feel it. And so I've come to the conclusion, and I'm willing to stand on this conclusion, that when you are in contact with, whether it be a Bigfoot or a dogman or a cryptid entity, there is something else there. And there's always something else there with it. If you go back to Fort Pierce, Florida, the young man Blue, who captured the dogman running across the screen, and he was on like all these paranormal talk shows and where they had his footage. Well, Blue had a set of pictures that he didn't make public that I've seen and only a few people have seen. And in that set of pictures, there was a dogman, and then the next set of pictures, there was clearly a Bigfoot. I think I shared the Bigfoot photo on my YouTube channel. But if you look at that Bigfoot photo, I don't even know if you can see it because I cropped it out, but I may have cropped it out. But on that same Bigfoot photo, up and to the left, was this thing that looked like a witch, but it had like a hood on its head again. Similar to exactly what we captured in Mississippi on those cameras, but a year prior to that. And so I've come to the conclusion that when you're dealing with these things, there are other spiritual entities associated with them. Now, the issue is, in my opinion, the issue is what role do they play in the equation? Because you'll hear hunters and fishermen and outdoorsmen say, I was out hunting or fishing, and the hair stood up on the back of my neck, right? And I felt like something was watching me. Is it due to the actual Bigfoot or the cryptid himself watching you, or is it due to what's associated with it giving you that sensation or that feeling? Because clearly, there's no doubt about it, there's something else there with him. I mean, and unfortunately, like in the field of like Bigfoot and Dogman, people don't want to talk about that aspect, which I call it the other stuff. People don't want to talk about the other stuff because it's not really cool to them. It's like everybody wants to hear about, oh, I ran from a Dogman, or, Bigfoot through a tree. That's cool. The other stuff is really not that cool, so nobody talks about it much. And that's one aspect of it, the spiritual aspect, that we're really, really missing out on. And to me, it's even more frightening because in every Dogman encounter and Bigfoot encounter I've heard, there's certain things you can do to mitigate it. Like, if you're out in the woods and you hear something breaking tree limbs, then guess what? It's time to go home, right? Or if you're on a lonely road in the middle of the night and you hear something growling and it sounds like a freaking dinosaur, then, hey, bro, it's time to get back in your car and go about your business, or get away if you can. But the people who've had like Bigfoot activity at their house, and then immediately days after that had paranormal activity inside of the house, poltergeist type activity, and that activity is directly associated with the presence of this Bigfoot who's not even in your house. It just came by, looked through your window, and it's like it left a little present with you for a couple of days. And it's like it left a little present with you for a couple of days. And it's like it left a little present with you for a couple of days. And it's like it left a little present with you for a couple of days. The guy's poltergeist activity, that's terribly frightening. Just like this phone call that just disconnected. This happens all the time. I'm serious, dude. I will be talking to a witness and we'll go through the encounter and it's all good. And then I start saying, was there anything else? Was there anything spiritual? And then they'll start opening up, because it's like talking to a witness is like cracking a safe, and to some extent, because you got to kind of turn left, turn right, get them talking. Then you got them talking and they're comfortable. Then you got to reset the safe and start unlocking the next phase. When I start unlocking the next phase and going deeper into the spiritual aspect, phones will hang up, static will come over the phone, all kind of crazy stuff, just like what happened to us just now. So there's definitely a spiritual aspect to this. Another story, I think I sent this one to you guys. Girl calls me and she wakes up at 3:00 in the morning feeling like something is choking her by her neck and pulling her. When she opens her eyes, she's literally outside of her body. So she can look over her shoulder and see that her body's laying in the bed. And when she looks to see what's holding her, it looks like a freaking Dogman. Like literally the photos of a Dogman that you see, except for it has these bright, glowing red eyes. And it's telling her, I have you now. You're mine now. And so she's freaked completely the hell out, can't talk, can't speak, can't do anything. So in her brain, she starts saying, Jesus, God, help me. Jesus, God, help me. And as that comes out, she literally feels herself slammed back into her body. Her physical body bounces on the bed and she sits up, opens her eyes, and she sees what she described to me as like this figure, like a humanoid figure that was made of cracked and broken glass, like right in her doorframe. And then it disappears. And so again, if there's no spiritual aspect to it, why would something be manifesting itself to look like that? You see what I'm saying? So it's a hell of a lot going on that people don't really get into because it's not popular. I'm getting into all of it because it's just the truth and it's what's out there and what people want to be heard.
Well, yeah. Well, that's where our show, lives and breathes is we go all the way back to Genesis 6. We interview all the guys that talk about that, from Tim Alberino to L.A. Marzulli to all these guys that write books about when creation was corrupted. And a lot of people have emailed us and said, they appreciate the spiritual side of our show, because a lot of these cryptid shows, they just tell you spooky stories and they don't give you any sort of roadmap on how to make sense of any of it.
Right.
Like, well, there's gotta be rules, and the Bible lays out there are rules, and Satan even follows the rules. So these things have to follow the rules too. Like in our last episode, the guy was like, Satan's just trying to catch God on a technicality. And it really put it into terms of like, Satan doesn't really have as much power, but he's constantly trying to manipulate the rules in which he has. And so these cryptid creatures, do you think they're like avatars for like spirits of the giants or spirits, fallen angels or
demons?
Demons, and are they sort of just being manipulated and used?
Like empty vessels, right? Like we've kind of talked about this briefly, like in the idea that like the demons and they need a body, right? They're disembodied spirits. Like, so, I mean, obviously we're talking in the hypothetical here, but you've got a lot of experience not only with witnesses and encounters, but, studying this stuff.
No, I can answer that question for you. I think there's definitely a place where, or I think there's definitely some truth to that. Can we say for certain that's 100% truth? Like every cryptid that someone encounters is an empty vessel that's being inhabited? No, we can't say that because we really don't have any of them locked up in labs, or the people who do have them locked up in labs won't let us in the lab. But what we can surmise from everything is that clearly there are things attached to them. And the way I see it is this: they create the perfect, or they are the perfect empty vessel for anything to inhabit. And whether it's they're constantly like an empty vase or an empty jar, or they can be inhabited at certain point in times, may be the case. So, for example, there's one gentleman who's in south of Lexington, Kentucky, right? And he has Bigfoots that transverse his property. This one Bigfoot, the male Bigfoot, will behave like cool as all outdoors. Won't give him no problems. He'll show himself. He won't steal anything. Like, it's just like in the area. And then there's times when that Bigfoot comes, and that Bigfoot is a holy terror. Like, and it may be like only a week or maybe 2-3 days out of the month, but it's like this holy terror. It's throwing stuff, screaming, hollering, doing all these different things. The conversation that he and I were having was that, well, maybe at some point in time, it becomes under the influence of something else. And what I'm coming to believe is that those things we see around them, maybe they can enter these beings at will. Or maybe either they can enter them at will and possess them when they want to, or the other opposite end of it is they are there and they restrain them from doing things that they shouldn't do. And that's the only way I can see it. It's either the beings are there as a restraint to say, okay, you can get close to these humans and look at them, but we ain't letting you go over there and go eat them. You know what I'm saying? Or they're there and they're attached and they're like, oh, I want to have some fun. It's a Saturday night. Let me hop inside of you and let me go beat on this wall. Let me look through this window and see this girl in the shower. Let me go harass these kids. I'm not 100% certain which one it is, but I think those are the two options on the table when we start talking about the spiritual aspect of what goes on.
I talked to a friend about this, and he says the lights. He thinks the lights with the Bigfoot are sort of these spirits that interact with the Bigfoot. So the lights aren't the Bigfoot itself. They're just there to protect us from them, or vice versa. And I that was a weird theory, but it makes you wonder what the glowing orbs around these cryptid creatures are, and if that is sort of a flicker into what you're describing. Is that the spiritual entity that's with the Bigfoot or the dogman or whatever? I don't know if people see lights with dogman, but I definitely know they see him with the Bigfoot encounters.
I definitely heard people say they've seen lights with dogman, or lights before the dog, not with, like simultaneously, but lights before the dogman encounters. Hell yeah, especially in Southeast Louisiana. A hell of a lot of people have seen like orbs of light. Some people have seen big bright lights that come out of the sky. Next thing you know, they're hearing howling and screaming and big wolves running around. So yes, that's definitely attributed to it. I don't know if that's, some people believe that's because they come from some kind of spaceship or whatever. I don't know. I can't answer that question. I'm not going to sit there and pretend I know the answer to that. What I do know is there have been ample enough witnesses who've had dogman and Bigfoot encounters who've been able to rebuke them spiritually, like rebuke them in the name of Jesus Christ. So there has to be a spiritual aspect to it because it can be spiritually rebuked. So that has to be in play. Now, how it all works, I'm still trying to figure it out, just like I'm pretty sure everybody else is still trying to figure it out. I'm not sure we'll ever figure that out.
Do you think that there's some connection to, we've interviewed this guy Fritz, and he documented all the burial mounds in North America. He went to over 700 mounds, and he proved that the giants built these, and these things are more than they call them Native American burial mounds, but he's like, they're not Native American. They were here long before the Native Americans, and they're they're almost like these portals to the underworld. Do you think some of these cryptid creatures are connected to these specific sites where the land was either defiled or they're coming around certain areas that are like demonic? Because they say a lot of hauntings happen around these mounds too. And so I wonder if there's a connection between some of these ancient places in America and this activity. It's not just, it's very central to some place that used to be used maybe in a straight up satanic ceremony or a burial ground.
Well, I'll say this. There's been very few opportunities that I've had to talk to like real Native American, like tribe members, like people who still part of tribes to this day. I think it's maybe 4 years ago. These guys called me. It was a consortium of them. It was 4 guys. They wanted to explain to me the skinwalker trials and what people had to go through to be a skinwalker. And during that conversation, we kind of went into burial mounds, and I'm asking questions. And, when you're talking to kind of a panel of 4 people like I was doing, they were all agreeing to answer certain questions. So 2 people will agree, 2 people will disagree, they wouldn't answer the question. Or 3 people will agree, and then 1 person would disagree, and then they would answer the question. So when I went into the burial mounds, my question was very specific. I said, the Native American burial mounds, were they here prior to your people being on the land, and are they portals? And they started discussing back and forth whether they were going to answer the question. I really should have released the recordings of that before that computer got hacked, because it was crazy how they did this. And they finally agreed to discuss it. And one of them says, those are gateways and portals. And I was like, gateways and portals to what? It said the spiritual realm. And I tried to figure out, get them to tell me what would come through, and they wouldn't tell me what would come through the portal. So that story of the trial of the skinwalkers, some people who are very, very prominent in the cryptid like authors, when they heard that story, they blew my phone up. They was like, dude, how can we get in contact with these people? Because it's tying all the pieces to the puzzle together. And then I went back to them and tried to get them to talk to some of the authors, and they all voted no. I was like, okay, well, cool. It is what it is. So I'm pretty sure that those are portals. I'm pretty sure that those were probably the original stargates that people kind of talk about from back in the days. Now, how they worked, and they would not go into any of that. I really wish they would have. Like, I'm at a point now where we're in the Great Awakening and the Great Revealing. Some people call it the apocalypse, which is nothing more than the Great Revealing. And I really wish some other cultures who have that kind of information would just say, you know what, it's time for us to talk about it. Because the world is in a funny place anyway right now, the way these people are acting, and we can blow each other up any day. So it's one of those time periods where you might as well start sharing your information. You know what I'm saying? Don't make no sense to hold the secrets back. Yeah. What's the purpose of holding a secret when you're living through, turmoil?
Yeah, if we're not going to be around, to look at it any longer, does it? That's crazy. I mean, that makes sense though. Like, we talk about the significance of mountains, Nate, in Mount Hermon, and pyramids being effigies of mountains, and then we have the mounds, which are also man-made mountains, and then the connection here, they're all over the globe, right? It's this, and then we talk about Genesis 6, and we talked to Tim and talked about how the Watchers and everything that happened in Enoch and in Genesis happened, and they touched down on top of Mount Hermon, and you're like, man, there's something really weird and also super spiritual. It just that all makes sense in this journey we've been on, D-Dub. That makes a ton of sense, right? And then we talked to Roger Saker up in Minnesota, who has a serpent mound on his property, found the serpent mound, and then was telling us about the stuff that comes through the egg in the mouth of the serpent, where he's like, yeah, he has wild stuff, boar crocs, he said, and the Bigfoot that came out of this portal, and Dogman came out of this egg that the serpent's mouth is around, which is part of the serpent mound on his property, and said that he fully believes it's a portal. So it's more affirming than anything to think that that's the case. And I do believe, like you say, that there's all this like secret knowledge, right? This stuff that lives in cultural lore and in sort of in the shadows and behind in these places of taboo. And I do believe, like last time we talked to you, we were saying just stuff is happening at an accelerated rate, and really believe that more things are happening, more cryptids are coming out, things that we haven't seen. We had a woman on our show who talked about having a rake encounter, just stuff like that. You're like, it seems to be ratcheting up.
Dude, let me tell you something. I've had in the past 24 months, I've had people call me about things that I've absolutely never would have thought existed. Like one lady called me about this guy who was outside of her house that dressed like a human being but had the face of a bat. Straight up had the face of a bat. And with the mask on, like a Batman. To the point to where him and his neighbor confronted this thing in his neighbor's side yard. And it like literally threw his neighbor up against the house and ran past him. Another person called me about a entity that she saw that had like a bull's face, but instead of having horns on top of the head, it had horns coming out of like the side of his neck at the bottom. Like crazy stuff, dude, that people are seeing. And it's all been over the past 24 months. I remember when, I forgot whose show I was on, but this is when this all started, when those phone calls started coming in with these crazy stuff that people were seeing. And I'm looping them and injecting. I'm testing these people's stories. And they're just coming back true over and over and over again. And I was telling somebody, I was like, dude, it seems like good and evil, there's been an imbalance in the world between good and evil. And I think it all started with this whole virus crap and tyranny and everything else that's going on. And I was like, there's an imbalance. And as this imbalance continues to shift towards the darkness, all kind of crap is just popping up. And people are seeing all kind of things. And people are having all kind of crazy experiences that it's almost as if the hedge of protection that we had, which is already thin, I just poked holes in that. And I could believe it, because think about it. Right. Over the past 24 months, you close down churches, you close down synagogues, you close down mosques, you lock people in their houses, all this other kind of stuff that separated people, causing depression, all this stuff went on. And so it was almost as if the world was enveloped in darkness. And I think once we get to that point where the tides shift in that direction, it opens the doors for these various things to come through. And I think they're just pouring in right now, bro.
So we talked to this week's episode, we talked to a guy that talked about how they needed bloodshed back in the day for these things to manifest, for these gods, right? These the lower G gods of the Old Testament. They had to do some sort of sacrifice to get them to manifest. It wasn't like they could just call on it and it would show up. They had to perform some sort of act. And everyone says, yes. And there's this fear, right? So these
spilling of
these
blood.
creatures just instill this insane fear. Do you think they feed off the fear in some way, as if like an ancient god would feed off the blood? Like the more freaked out and fear-based they can get human beings, it's almost like their fuel. It gives them some sort of extra power or some kind
of any ghostly encounter, any demonic encounter, they always feed off of people's fear. But think about what's going on for the past 24 months. The world has been in a state of fear for over 24 months. Like pure, unadulterated fear. Scared to go outside. Scared to talk to somebody. Scared to go sit next to somebody. Nothing but fear is what's been pumped out and fed. So, of course, it's been a smorgasbord for the spiritual entities because they're just feeding off of it everywhere. And we're not talking about like geographically one nation was in fear. We're talking about the entire globe for the first time in the grips of fear. So, yeah. And I'm not going to, this is your guys' podcast. I'm not going to go into what I think the bloodshed is, but anybody who studied what's going on, there's been significant amount of bloodshed as well. So absolutely, they're feeding off of it. And there's definitely an imbalance. And like in my city of New Orleans, the imbalance is it's palpable. You can taste it, touch it, smell it, feel it. It's to the point to where, and I talk to friends who live in Orleans Parish, they'll say, bro, I left out of Orleans Parish and went to St. Tammany Parish to go get something. He was like, dude, I felt like I left out of a bubble and I went into a lighter environment. And I have friends who like live in Slidell and they have to commute into New Orleans every day for their business. And they'll tell you, bro, as soon as I cross Orleans Parish boundaries, I feel like I'm driving into this cloudy, murky, like bubble. It's like, even though it's sunny outside, you know what I'm saying? You just feel it. Yeah. It's definitely going down out here in these streets.
I'm going to say, talk about the bloodshed. I mean, this is, you are a guest on here, and that's something we have talked about. And I understand, too, that, like, man, we butchered an entire generation of children in the womb. We live in a society that is killing people. Like, and so I can't help but think that some of these things that are systematic are intentional. Like in the sense we talk about Moloch and we talked about the gods of the Old Testament and these representations of either the Watchers or Satan himself, and the idea of sacrificing babies and the idea of sacrificing humans, and we know the occult is big on that. And so if you want to talk a little bit about that, we can get into that territory too, because it wouldn't be it would be like a dovetail. It wouldn't be too far off track from where we've been, I think, in a lot of the places that we've tread. So I mean, if you want to, we're good with that.
I mean, that's one of the directions, but I prefer not to go in that direction because they're censoring people and censoring podcasts that talk about it. But what I'll say is this. Okay. If you go look at the statistics, over the past 24 months, the millennial generation has lost 61,000 members of the millennial generation since they started mandating people do certain things. Statistically, that's what's happened. So when you look at the statistics, I used to be in the insurance business with Allstate. Allstate sold off its insurance companies off because they didn't want the liability. And so now the death rate across the nation has increased by 40% across the United States. So there's something major going on. And it's almost as if people are self-selecting. They're making decisions which are hurting them in bad ways. And they can only be held accountable for those decisions because they chose not to actually look into it and do it themselves. So it's almost like you selecting to kill yourself or selecting to harm yourself, right? And when you start talking about faith and having faith in God, and then you're presented with a choice. I'm presented with something that's scary. You know, I can get sick, I can die, something can go wrong. Do I choose to have faith in God and live my life as a faithful and have faith in God, or do I choose to have faith in someone else's word? And from a spiritual aspect, from a spiritual choice, think about Jesus when Satan, presented himself on the side of the mountain, said, "Hey, I'll give you this. I'll give you all these kingdoms in the world." And he presented Jesus with a choice. You can have this, or, basically there's a possibility that you're going to go ahead and die. Jesus chose to stay with his Father, and he knew what was coming down the pipeline for him. He still made that decision. And so the world has been presented with decisions that they have to make, and the world there's sacrifices going all over the world right now. And then we're getting ready to add war into that, which is more bloodshed, more sacrifices going all over the world, which we've had wars all the time. Right. But so we have a lot of blood being shed across the planet at this point in time. And so that's the most politically correct way I can say it without like spazzing out. So of course the scales are imbalanced. And if you look at it from a 30,000 foot view, you see the scales are imbalanced. You can feel the scales out of balance. And it's absolutely terrifying. It really, really is. I mean, it's absolutely terrifying. But it is what it is. You stay prayerful. You live your life. And now's the time to get right with God, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so that's what I do.
I agree with you because I remember last year I flew from Florida to California, and I felt like I flew into a bubble when I got into California. It was weird. It was like that's where my family lives.
I guarantee you did.
Spent Christmas there. And it was just the juxtaposition between Florida and California were night and day. It was hard to describe. And then you roll.
Well, it's biblical, Nate. Yeah, you have principalities and you have these places that have been given.
But I could feel it. I could feel it. It just felt like, man, everyone is freaked out here. Everyone is so afraid. Like you went to a place where nobody's wearing a mask or doing anything, and then you fly into a place a couple hours later, and everyone's got 10 masks on and in their cars
by themselves, and they're freaked out. Yeah, you're willingly giving yourself over to that fear.
Right.
It's no different than when people would willingly sacrifice their children to the fires of Moloch. It is no different from a spiritual aspect. Like you're willingly turning yourself over to fear, and the only thing that you need to be afraid of is God, man. You know what I'm saying? Honestly, really. It's the only thing you should be afraid of, Right. So massive decision on people's parts, man.
Do you think that we're going to experience some kind of 10 plagues in the modern day, some sort of, because we see that a lot on our show, that the narratives repeat over and over again. Like we were just talking about how, in Revelation, it says 2 messengers are going to come and warn the people at the end. And some people think that's Moses and Elijah. And, that happened on the mountain with Jesus at the Transfiguration. Moses and Elijah show up. And so we see these repeating themes throughout throughout the Old Testament, and then a lot of people come on our show and say they're going to come again. And the days of Noah.
The days of Noah. Yeah, it's going to be like the days of Noah again. It's the end is the beginning. The beginning, like it's the now. Yeah, it's fascinating to see that the end plays out. You know, God destroyed the earth by water, and then promised to never do that. And then we see Revelation where God destroys the earth by fire. But you have the same set of circumstances that happen in both cases to get to what would be judgment or the end.
You know, those are the moments that people wake up. You know. But it makes me think of the 10 plagues. It makes me think that some of this crazy stuff is going to start happening and manifesting. I don't know if it's in that similar vein, because that was pretty hardcore, but what you're describing...
I'm not sure about that one, but what I will say is this. People are given the opportunity now to wake up, and people are given now the opportunity to repent and turn and change their ways, because now everything that people held sacred is being like literally shattered overnight. What you thought was true a week ago is proven no longer be true. Actually, what you thought was true yesterday is proven within 24 hours to be a lie. And when it comes to a lot of the things that are going on. So I think turmoil, which is what we go through, is designed for us to get closer to God. And a lot of people worry about, you know, the physical world, their houses, their cars, their money. At the end of the day, if you ever had any wealth, if you ever had anything, it's all temporary. And the most important thing is your family and your relationship with God. And if you have those things right, then there's nothing to fear at the end at all, in my opinion. So for me, it's, hey, man, you know, stay right with God, do right by people, handle your business, live your life, and it's going to be what it's going to be. You know what I'm saying? It really is. It's going to be what it's going to be, in whether it's the 10 plagues, whether there's some freaking aliens, whether somebody invades this country, man, it is what it is. Whatever happens, we just going to get it popping. That's how I feel about it. If the aliens come, we're going to test them. You know what I'm saying? Let's see how you like these bullets. You know what I'm saying? And it is what it is. You know, it's one of those things to where right now, I just refuse, me personally, to be afraid of all this crap. Like, once you see what fear does to people, how fear makes people think so illogically, you have to make a decision to trust in God and not be afraid, period. You know what I'm saying? Like today, I told you guys I was going car shopping. Me and my fiance, we went out to way bum hole in the wall of Texas to go look at a car. She's like, man, we way out here. And I'm like, and she's like, I don't know about this area. I'm like, I don't care. We're going. Hop out the car. What's up, guys? What's going on? They're like, oh, hell, who are you? I'm not afraid of anything anymore. I refuse to be afraid. So it's one of those things to where it's going to be what it's going to be. You know, you prepare yourself, you do what you need to do to defend yourself, defend your family, spiritually, physically, and emotionally, and then let the chips fall where they may, and have faith in God and believe in God and keep it moving. And that's where I stand on it. And because if you speculate and you keep trying to dive down that rabbit hole, in my opinion, it turns into a trap, because you can go down that rabbit hole and end up in a place where you read about the soul and how when a person dies, the soul goes through fire and it burns off all the bad stuff. And then the soul goes into the great rest. And then that soul is reincarnated into another body. And it's got to learn these lessons. And then you start all over and you visit this planet 1,000 times and blah, 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 blah. You can go into so many rabbit holes that, in my opinion, are designed to shake your faith, that you get to a point where it's just time to stand and say, okay, this is what I believe in. This is where I stand. Let's see what comes my way. You know, and that's kind of where I'm at with it. You know, I don't see anywhere else to go, you know, and people speculate and they go in a lot of different directions, but it all comes back to, do you have faith in God or not? Yeah. I mean, it really does. For example, guys, let's say there were cloud-eating giants that appeared on the planet tomorrow. Like literally, we woke up tomorrow morning, they were showing us giants that were as tall as the clouds, right? We got a couple of choices, right? We're going to let the giants eat us, or we're going to try and kill them. That's the two choices, right? You ain't eating me. We're going to be cutting some ankles out here in these streets. Right. You know what I'm saying? So if tomorrow we woke up and there were demons running down the street like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you got two choices. I'm going to let this demon get me, or we're going to figure out how to kill these demons. Yeah, it's just, in my opinion, now it's time to make it simple.
Well, it makes you think about some of the Psalms. You know, David's writing these laments and saying things like, you know, I'm walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And some guys have hypothesized that there were these areas and territories where the giants were, just like that, and God was always with them. Mm-hmm. And it's really, you think about some of these guys that lived through these times when they were in the valley of the shadow of death. They were literally afraid for their life everywhere they went. And you had to trust God in a different way when it's life and death. And I feel like if the veil thins and some of this stuff does return, instantly your Joel Osteen faith is out the window. Because I think feels like it's ramping up. Aliens are about to come. They're almost here. And I think that's why a lot of people find shows like this, where people who are willing to talk about the weird stuff but incorporate their faith into it. And we're getting a lot of emails and people talking about how they feel like the church has completely snuffed out the most important parts of the Bible, which give context.
Oh yeah, they've completely snuffed all that out, bro. That's the one thing, guys, that I'm honestly saying. I smoke a lot of cigars with pastors and preachers, black pastors and preachers. And I would sit there and just go into the Bible and start talking about Genesis 6. And they'd be like, well, those things weren't necessarily real giants and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, hold on, bro. So you trying to tell me? And I would spaz. Like, so you trying to tell me you went to school to study this whole thing? I'm like, I would go to the car, get my Bible, and slam it on the table. You went to school to study this.
Yeah.
Y'all didn't go into none of the stuff about the giant? You learned none of this. You
walked him right into a trap, D-Dub. You're like, sons of Seth, huh? What do you
Yeah.
Yeah, like, what is wrong with you? And so, man, I'm going to tell you like this. Unfortunately, the churches have abandoned so much important teachings. It's to the point to where the average Christian believes that you're supposed to be, I'm going to turn the other cheek, I'm going to let you do anything you want to do to me. They don't know the battles that were fought. They don't know the wars that were fought. They don't know anything about the giant wars. They don't know any of that stuff because it's glossed over in the lessons that they teach people. And so the attitude of a Christian being a strong warrior for God is not there. Why? Because it's not taught. It's conveniently left out. When people talk about David.
Or they call it genocide and completely rewrite the stories. Like, they don't believe in violence and they rewrite the Old Testament. Even worse, it's because they don't understand what the Israelites are up against.
No, you're right. They don't understand that they were up against child sacrifice and demonic beings. I was reading in one of the Apocrypha books. It literally sounded like they were describing vampires. I swear, it would seem like I was like, "This a vampire you describing that they're fighting? What the hell is this?" So it's like nobody touches on none of that stuff. It's just like right now, there's this whole conversation about Russia and Ukraine, but nobody knows the history of the Khazarians, which are that came from the area of Ukraine. Nobody knows the history of it. They don't know that. It was known around the world back in the 1900s that if you went through that area, they were called name stealers. Like they would literally invite you into their house and feed you food, then kill you, steal your name, and go to the next town or next city or next country and try and do business in your name and screw everybody over. They don't know that. They don't know that. You know how people talk about the cabal, the money cabal, and Kabbalah magic. They don't know that that's the area where it all came from. People don't understand that because they don't have an understanding of history. But if you have an understanding of history, then you're sitting there like, when I sit and watch the news, I'm sitting there looking like, wow, so we really supposed to like defend the home of literally the cabal, like literally the home of it. Because on one side of it was the Roman Empire, and the other side was like the Islamic Empire. Those people ended up saying that they were Jewish when they weren't the original Jewish people. It was all kind of crazy stuff. And I'm like, wow, this is where the whole, cabal of money, cabal of evil came from. That's the region. And I'm sitting there like, wow, so you want me to like give money to the whole region where all the drama started? But people don't know. And nobody teaches the people the truth. But it's out there. You want to go look it up. Look up the Khazarians. And you'd be like, oh, holy crap, DW is right. This is crazy. But it's where it all started.
We actually have an episode this week that's scheduled to talk just about that, honestly, about the Khazarians, just because it's pertinent now. Hey, I wanted to ask you, because we're talking about waking up and quickening, and you're someone who has your ear to the ground in this entire space. And we were talking before the show. I would love to hear. You said last 24 months your phone has been ringing off the hook. I would love to hear like some of the encounters that you've had or stories you've heard. Maybe just a couple of them that have been like the most they've impressive or most crazy to you to hear about what's going on? Because one of the things that we talk about with you, especially here and in our last episode, and then even in our show on the White Ark, is this quickening, this increase in activity, whether it be UFO activity or cryptids, or even when we talk about the rise of the occult and all these really overt things that are happening now, like where they don't hide anymore, right? And I would love with someone who's in the trenches and you hear the things that are going on. People call you. Do you have a few encounters you can tell us about that? They're fresh off the line, that are maybe wow ones or that kind of blew you away. I know the Batman one was wild, so we got one already, which is because we hadn't heard anything like that. But I would love to, if you have a few that you could share with us, because you're someone who's right there.
No, I'll share one with you that I haven't even produced yet. So I think this was earlier. It may have been like towards the end of last year. You can go look it up in the news. Anyway, there was this. People were talking about hearing this sonic boom, like this booming sound around New Orleans, right? And I already knew who I could talk to try and get an idea of what was going on, but I just had to be in the right environment. So one of my childhood friends, his brother-in-law is a police chief, right? So they finally had their housewarming party because they bought a beautiful house in Slidell. We were all sitting out there at the housewarming party. I go out in the back to smoke a cigar. He comes out, borrows a cigar. So I'm talking to the chief, right? Literally the chief of New Orleans Police Department. And I'm like, Ferg, what's the deal with this boom that people keep on saying they heard around the city? I was like, I didn't hear no boom. And I said, but I got a couple of people that called me talking about they heard a boom. And he knows a little bit about what I do. Not a whole bunch. He knows I have a YouTube channel and he knows it deals with paranormal, but he doesn't know like how far I dig into stuff. So I'm trying to like get little information from him. And he's like, well, man, it was real weird. He was like, we arrested a guy who had like all these old artifacts. I'm like, okay. And he said, while we had him in holding, he was sitting there bragging to this kid that had dreadlocks about him having a Babylonian battery. And I'm like, Babylonian battery? I ain't never heard of no damn Babylonian battery. What the hell is a Babylonian battery, right? So he's talking. I'm like Googling it, like Babylonian battery, Babylon. Finally, it comes up on like Wikipedia. Like it was a vase that from Babylon that where they created their own battery, their own power source.
I've seen that.
And he was like, he was in the holding cell talking about it, and he told his kid that that's what the explosion was. It was the Babylonian battery. So I'm like, whatever. All right, cool. We gonna let it go. Bump into him again, and I started questioning more about it. He's like, look. Call Red. Now, this guy, Red, I've known Red forever. Red just retired from NOPD. He's like, call Red. He was the detective that worked. So I call Red, talking to Red. Man, Red, tell me about this situation. He's like, man, I don't know what the hell that was. He's like, but for sure, homeboy had something that exploded in the city, and it made a loud boom. And I was like, well, did it tear down any buildings? Did he do anything? He said, no, it just let off this gigantic pulse, and it blew up. And I was like, what the hell? So that's something wild. Prior to that, I had a guy share a story with me where his brother was traveling to Europe and stealing just random freaking artifacts from people. Like he stole a watch that had the ability to like slow down time. And like I'm talking to the dude, bro, sometimes when I talk to people, I'm like, okay, you BSing me, man. You know what I'm saying? Like you really BSing me. And so I spend hours and hours like on the phone with those people because I want to know if it's true or not. This guy, man, I spent like 12 hours over a month and a half talking to him. And I'm drilling down on this dude. Like, I don't think I've ever drilled anybody the way I drilled him. And finally it gets to the point to where I said, man, let me talk to your wife. Because I can't find a hole in the story. So let me talk to your wife. And so his wife confirmed one thing, which was that she was trying to throw away a watch that was in their safe when they were moving houses. And he flipped out over throwing away his brother's watch. And that was the only thing she was able to confirm. That's the only question I wanted to know. It's the only thing, that she confirmed for me. Because I'm thinking he might have prepped her. You know what I'm saying? People will do that. The couple will prep the lie. So I'm not going to hit her with too much. I'm just going to hit the one little thing to see if it's true. And those are two of the more weird things that I've heard recently. Like most people want to hear about cryptids, but the reason why I want to share those two things is I personally believe that as we go through you see places collapsing and falling and economic turmoil and things of that nature. I think that people are actually being able to gain access to stuff that's been hidden that, we haven't been able to gain access to. We know for a fact, like the Smithsonian Museum went out and took Bigfoot skeletons and giant skeletons, and they hid them somewhere, right? We know that. Somehow, some way, this stuff is starting to leak out. And to me, that's really the most intriguing stuff right now. When you get on a cryptid side, which people want to talk about scary, spooky cryptid, one of the things that I would say would have to be the most frightening was this young lady who called me and talked about what she described as a lizard arm coming from under her bed while she was asleep and literally grabbing her on her leg. So imagine you go to bed at night and 2 o'clock in the morning rolls around and you feel something touching on your leg. Well, when you click on a light, there's literally what looks like a lizard arm, like coming from under your bed. It's green and it's grabbing your leg. Well, eventually you build up the courage to look under the bed and all you see is like this shimmering light under your bed, like it's some kind of portal under your bed that's allowing this thing to come up and grab you. And that's probably the most recent cryptid one that's spooky and scary. Lizard arm coming from under her bed. Lizard arm coming from under her bed. Lizard arm coming from under her bed.
Dang. Tito, I mean, so when I was a kid, I saw a dogman in the doorway of my houses. I was probably like 6, 7 years old, and it had the glowing red eye. It had the glowing red eyes, and I remember doing like a triple take because I was the youngest of 4 kids, and I was walking, and it was probably around 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, and I look out the back door. And then up in the screen is this dogman face. And I didn't know that it was a dogman until years later. I just thought, I'm seeing a werewolf, I'm seeing, and then I screamed and ran, and then my parents came and it was gone. But, I thought I imagined the whole thing till I started listening to shows like this, a few years later.
And this was outside the window, or this was in the house?
This was outside the window. It was like looking in the screen glass door. We had this like little the back door was open, but there was just a little screen door that was like in front of the regular door, and then there's like a window, the top half of it, and I just saw on the top of it just this face and then these eyes, and it was just like smiling at me, and I know I didn't run initially because I was like, I'm not seeing what I'm seeing right now. And I looked again, and I remember it just freaked the crap out of me. And to the point where, like, for years, I didn't look out that window when I went from one end of the house to the next. But I convinced myself it was just in my head. I didn't actually see that thing. But kids see cryptid creatures a lot. Kids see things that they shouldn't see, that adults can't see. And just the fact that it was in the suburbs of Sacramento, I thought, that's impossible. There's no way that creature could get there. But I mean, when you bring the whole spiritual element to the table, they can manifest. A lizard arm could come out of your bed because, I mean, if it's in the backyard of my suburban house, they could be anywhere. And a lot of people do see dogmen in the house, which I think is just terrifying.
Well, and you're touching on something that's really significant. So when you start talking about encounters with dogmen, there's all these physical encounters that take place in areas where it's logical for those encounters to happen, right?
Exactly.
But then you start getting to suburban and urban areas where people are having encounters with what I believe are the actual true spiritual essence and entity that gains the worship from people who kind of like consume dogman encounters and are fascinated with it. Like, out of all of the cryptids out there, dogman itself has like a cult fascination to it. I mean, it really does. It's crazy how people are fascinated with it.
No thanks.
Well, you have these encounters where people are at home in bed in an apartment complex, and they see literally what looks like a dogman with glowing red eyes. Now, not shining, not like reflective, shining red eyes. I mean, like piercing, glowing red eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference is it's in a location, bro, that it makes no sense. For example, like one of the stories I sent you guys about this guy who worked a security job outside of Huntsville, Alabama in this medical research facility. Well, there's a morgue in the basement, right? So his nighttime job was basically come on shift, turn off all the lights, go to the basement, turn the lights out, and sit you behind at a desk with a little lamp on in a dark building, make sure nobody come and break into the building, right? Well, it don't make sense, but he's in the basement, gets spooked out, and has to go to, it's real freaky. So one in the hall, imagine you're on a long hallway. You got to walk down that hallway, turn the lights off in every room. So every light you turn off, it gets darker and darker and darker. At the other end of the hallway is the freight elevator, which is one of those old warehouse elevators where you got to pull the little door down and it has the glass window, right? And then you hit the button and the elevator goes up and the door stays closed. Well, once all the lights off, the only light in the hallway is the light outside the elevator. Well, his second night on the job, and somebody explained this to me when it comes to dogman encounters, but his second night on the job, he gets to the end of the hallway, he closes the elevator door, hits the button, the elevator takes a long time to start, and he looks through that window and sees these glowing red eyes getting closer and closer and closer until it gets up on him, and he can see it's literally a werewolf face in that little small window. And as the elevator goes up, remember the door stays stationary because it's locked. As the elevator goes up, those eyes watch him as he go up. And imagine like you're looking down at your feet because the door stays stationary. You're going up. And then he has to come out on the first floor, and they wanted him to spend the rest of the night in that building. He's like, nah, bro, dog, I quit that job that night. He's like, I left, brought this stuff back the next day. I was done. I wasn't doing that no more. So you talk about those kind of dogman encounters, which it makes no sense. How's it in the building? So it's got to be something spiritual.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Oof.
It's got to be.
Yeah. I mean, and then I felt like our family got heavily spiritually attacked right after I see this thing. And there was something down the street. My mom told me a story that, you know, there was this girl that babysat for her. And she told my mom that every time they left the house, she'd come back and something went in their closet and ripped all the clothes down.
Wow.
And my mom and dad are like, yeah, that's not normal. So they went over there and prayed over their house. That was like a couple houses away. And it stopped doing that. Yeah, there's some weird stuff. I mean, that's the thing. And then it wasn't until I was late, you know, mid to late 30s when I thought, you started hearing everyone else talk about this thing when I put two and two together, like, oh my, you know, I did see something. It wasn't something I made up. You know, it wasn't just watching too many of those 80s horror movies and thinking that, oh yeah, like people see these things. And I think that's the hard part is that, you know, people have this PTSD when they have these moments and these events. And it's almost like their brain tells them, you're not seeing what you're seeing. There's not a lizard arm coming out of your bed. You know, that's just in your mind. But it sounds like it's physical. It sounds like it's manifesting in a physical way. People are seeing these things. And as an adult, it's got to be even more terrifying. Because as a kid, you can just write it off like, oh yeah, I just have this imagination. Your mom's like, you're fine, honey. You didn't see that. But I just can't imagine a lizard arm coming out from under the bed and grabbing you.
Well, for an adult, it's absolutely terrifying because the context of your mind has to change. Like a kid's mind is so flexible that, you know, if kids grew up and they realized that there were real demons running around on the street, they'll, okay, that's a demon, I need to avoid him, and they'll adapt to it. But for an adult, the context of everything you believe and everything you once held true has to shift once you have these encounters. And that's where the difficulty comes in for an adult, because we tend not to want to change our context of our mind. But some encounters just simply shatter all context. So after you've had that encounter, there's no way to go back from having that encounter. So, for example, for me, after living on 2706 Robert Street and seeing a gigantic freaking shadow go down the hallway, there is no way I can unsee that. No one can tell me I didn't see it. Nobody can tell me I didn't hear the whispering when it happened. You can't change my mind about that. I know that it's real. I know that there are spirit. I knew it was sent for me, and I knew I needed to defend myself, and I haven't had any problems with it since, but there's no way you can change my mind about that. So it completely shifted my context. Now, let me say this to the audience who's listening, because most people think that it's a negative thing when you see this type of stuff. You really actually, if you look at it the right way, you're in a phenomenal position because you are no longer a normie. So your mind has saw something, processed something, or maybe it's still trying to process something out the norm, which means you're not a normie anymore. You're not locked into the traditional context which everybody else is locked in. So you're outside of the realm of thinking of everybody else. And once you learn how to manage it and move around in it, you actually are more powerful than the average person, because the average person will take something and they'll brush it off. Oh, they were saying that, I don't know, hypothetically, they say that, somebody saw a submarine in the Gulf of Mexico close to New Orleans, right? The average person will brush that off. Well, that weird, crazy stuff happens, so you give it the attention it deserves and pay attention when you're supposed to. And that's the gift of the paranormal at a time like this in the world that we live in right now. Those of us who've experienced the paranormal are truly been given a gift. It doesn't seem like a gift when the world is completely sane, right? When everything is operating normal. But in an insane world, which is what we live in right now, it's a gift because it allows you to pay attention and allows you not to just gloss over stuff and throw it away. So the weird and strange, you don't have a problem paying attention to the weird and strange. You don't have a problem reading something and trying to decipher it in a manner in which saying, okay, well, this person might be lying. Let me think about this myself. And that is the greatest gift that the paranormal can ever give you. And in my opinion, all things paranormal, all things supernatural, all things spiritual come from God. So when you look at it, it's the greatest gift that God could have ever given you. Now, in the time period that it happened, for the little girl who had something grabbing her feet, or the person who had something rubbing on their butt in their sleep, when it's happening, it's not really the most comfortable thing. Or for the man who saw a dog man outside his window, when that happened, that was terrifying, right? But as you mature and as you grow in the understanding of kind of the ethereal realm and everything that's going around you, you really become a powerful person. So I just say to your audience, like in closing, like, don't look at it like a negative thing. Look at it truly as a positive thing, because you have a gift to where you've seen the truth. You've seen the other side of the veil, and it exists. The average person that I talk to has no clue whatsoever that there's a spiritual aspect to everything. Their sexual relationship in their marriage, their children's lives, the vehicle that they drive. They have no clue. They literally are walking around blind. But you have a clue.
Yeah.
You've seen the light and you've seen the dark, and you get to make a choice. They just willy-nilly, bro. They just running around willy-nilly. That's more frightening to me than anything. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
People will stick their head in the sand willingly, and they want to leave it there.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, you brilliantly put that together, because that's how I've felt a million times in the last 2 years. Just like shouting from the rooftops to people, like, hey, don't you smell this? You smell what's cooking? It's like they can't even entertain a conspiracy theory, let alone the hundreds that have been proven true in the last 2 years. It's like there's like a defect in their brain. But I love the description of the paranormal, because that's, to me, it completely unlocked the Old Testament. You cannot understand the Old Testament. Every crazy story in the Old Testament happened. It happened. And if you read it like a modern day human, you can't process it. The crazy stories in there, you're like, no, they didn't happen. And these preachers are preaching them in a way like they didn't happen. Like there were these metaphorical stories. No, that stuff happened. And the paranormal gives you an ability to read the Old Testament for the first time, I think. And then if you can't make sense of Genesis, you can't make sense of anything happens in the Bible. But you start to go back and put it all together, and then you're like, oh my God, wow, it's a spiritual war. That's what this book is. We are in a war. And something like a Bigfoot encounter or a dogman encounter can break open your brain to accept it. I don't know why, but you're right. It's all spiritual. Love it.
No, it happens, dude. It happens to people over and over. I've talked to so many witnesses and that's the one thing that makes my job hard. Like, I talk to a witness, and to really get to the truth, I got to talk to them 15, 20 times. But then you build a rapport with that person. So you end up talking to them over years. And I've watched that progression in people over and over and over again. They have an encounter. They're a very secular person. They're concerned about money or girls, or they were into witchcraft or whatever it was. And over the years, as their context has changed and shaped and shifted, they start gravitating closer to God, and they start realizing, wait, hold on, bro, DW. I really think, this world has this spiritual blah, blah, blah going on. I'm like, okay, man, congratulations. You made it to the end of the yellow brick road, bro. Like, for real, you're right.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it's been talk show hosts that I've been friends with for years that were straight up Wiccan, straight up into like all kinds of stuff. And over the years of me doing interviews with them, it just naturally takes its course. They'll be like, yo, I'm going to read my Bible a lot, and it's crazy because like all the negative stuff has been going away. But like, yeah, you're being guided in that direction. And it happens naturally, but it always stems from those encounters. But it goes back to what I was saying. You get to make a choice. You can choose the dark or you can choose the light. You can choose the dark and then turn around and choose the light later. You know what I'm saying? But people get to make a choice. And the beauty of it is you really have a true choice because you're not blind. And that's the thing, you were talking about people who you can try and explain things to them and make them see what's going on. Some people, in my opinion, for whatever reason, they're not meant to see it. They're just not. They're absolutely not meant to see it. And they're meant to go through something horrific and terrible. I mean, they really are meant to go through it because I've talked to witnesses who call me about, demonic activity. And I'll tell them, hey, bro, I can tell you why this particular demonic thing happens. It happens because you do this sexual sin. And I've talked to people who do this exact sexual sin, and then this is what happens. If you stop this for a week and then see what happens, they won't stop. They'll keep doing it. They'll keep having that activity. But that's a choice they're making. So it's meant for you to go through that. I'm giving you the answer to why you should stop, how you can stop, but you choose to do it. Well, you know what? That's your choice. Go ahead and go through it. You chose the dark side. You're going to take the long way around. You know what I'm saying? You're going to go around the corner, across the highway, under the bridge, through the ravine, swim through the swamp, and then come back to where you were supposed to be. And that's your choice, and that's what you're meant to go through. And that's how it is for some people. And I don't think you can do anything about it. You can only help those people who are in the position where they're primed to be helped. And a lot of those people, you're in the field right now where those people are. They're listening to the Paranormal podcast. They're listening to the shows. They're like, I remember talking to a guy who ended up getting high on cocaine here I'm in Dallas right now, but in New Orleans. He went to my favorite bar room, the Foundation Room, and he ended up having sex with what he described as two girls who were demons in the Foundation Room, which is like the House of Blues VIP lounge. And I know he wasn't lying because I used to hang out there in the exact spot where he was talking about. I have been in that spot. I know what's there. Hung out with bros there. Like, he was not lying. And as far as him using cocaine and doing the drugs, that's what you do there. You go there to use drugs, whatever you're going to do, get drunk, do whatever you want to do. But he had sex with two demons in there.
Jeez.
What about you, DW? Like, did this stuff strengthen your faith, or were you always kind of open-minded to these things? Or did, hearing more of these stories kind of make you sort of get your life right with God?
God whooped my ass, bro. So, you gotta understand my background. I'm a classically trained electrical engineer. Hardcore networker, entrepreneur, was on the board of directors for New Orleans public-private partnership, done political consultant work with Ray Nagin, Mitch Landry. Like, I am so far away from what I thought my skill set was intended to be used for, that to be here now and doing this, it was like God said, hey, I gave you this skill set. You're over here pretty much doing evil. like for real. Like, okay, I need you to stop. And I didn't stop. He said, okay, I'm going to start taking shit from you. All right, you lose this, you lose that, you lose this. And I got to a point, guys, where I was isolated and alone. Like, my family turned their back on me. Everybody turned their back on me. And then I came under spiritual warfare attack. And the only person I had around me at that point in time was my fiance now. And the only other thing I had was my sons and God. And then I went through attacks to the point to where you couldn't sleep. My hairs were turning gray. If you see the pictures of me, you'll see like my goatee is gray. I'm about to be 45 years old. My goatee is gray. Like, there is no black hair. Like, that's how bad my spiritual warfare was. And it got to the point to where God said, okay, I'm going to keep on letting this stuff mess with you till you realize what's going on and realize what I want you to do. And so then one day I started learning how to defend myself spiritually. And then as I prayed more and more and more, then God said, okay, now you understand where you're at. And now I'm going to start blessing you with things. And so I started getting small blessings here and there. We're talking about losing contracts that were city contracts, $800,000 in New Orleans, $250,000 in Mobile, like serious bread being lost, right? And that, imagine the ego that's associated with that. It's ego is the word to put. Like the personality that you have to walk into the rooms and deal with the people that I dealt with. And then take that same personality and slam it into a bucket, put the lid on it, and just start drowning it with all kind of crazy activity going on, and pretty much killing that person and then rebirthing another person who's way more spiritual, way more understanding of what's going on, and doesn't have an interest in that stuff anymore. Like I get calls all the time where people are like, hey man, why don't you come and work with us on this campaign? Nah, bro, I'm good. I don't want to do it. Well, it's $20,000. Nah, bro, I'm good. I'm done. I don't want anything to do with it. So I personally had my butt whipped to the point to where the man that you're talking to now is the polar opposite of what I used to be. Like, and that old person was on demon time, like for real. That old person was on pure demon time. Like I was not the dude that you wanted to be around. Not meaning like, like I got black eyes and nothing, but like when it came to moving and shaking, and if you was in the way, bro, I was making it happen to you. You know what I'm saying? So I've had my butt whipped. And to answer your question, it's been all spiritual warfare, but it's been the greatest gift I've ever had, because now for my bloodline moving forward, I know that there are certain enemies that I've defeated, and I see the enemies that are testing my bloodline now while they're testing. And so I have two sons, and I'll sit down with my son and I'll see it. Like my oldest son, I noticed he was acting weird. It was going on this right before his 18th birthday. I set him down. I said, hey, you feeling depressed, huh? He was like, yeah, how you know that? I said, because something tried to kill me when I was 18. He was like, what? And I was like, yeah. I said, it's going to be about a depression that hits you. And I said, you're the oldest son is going to hit you. It's going to try and make you commit suicide. I said, pray and you'll be fine. And he was like, Pops. Like, he was like, Pops, yo, like the part of my language, he's like, Pops, yo, the shit you be telling me. He was like, yo, you be on point. And I'm like, yeah. I said, because it's coming for you, because it couldn't get me. And like I told his younger brother, I said, yo, this is what's coming for you. He's like, really? And then a few weeks later, he was like, yo, it happened just like you said. And I was like, yeah, it's because it comes back again and again and again. And once you see the spiritual aspect of it, I saw it going back through my bloodline on my father's side, on my mother's side of the family. Like you see it, like it's just there, bro. It's hard to explain, but it's there if you pay attention. And if you pay attention and you see it, you can stop it. And so I think the greatest gift I've been given now is the ability to see what's coming and what's there. And that's with random people that I talk to. That's with witnesses that I talk to. That's with friends in the paranormal field. And like one of the guys that I was in business with just recently, me and him talking, I was like, yo, every test that you get over the next 12 months is going to have to do with a woman. And the last 4 tests that he had dealt with women. It was always a woman trying to get under his skin. It was a woman trying to get him to do something that would, mess up his life. And I said, it's going to be a woman. On his new job, it was a woman that was trying to get him fired. I said, because you are a failure when it comes to women. I said, so you're going to be tested with that same spirit over and over again. And it's always a woman with the same type of personality, the same type of spirit that's coming at him every time. And it's to the point now, he called me today. He was like, yo, dude, he's like, I don't know if to call you a Jedi Knight. I don't know what to call you. He's like, bro, but this is crazy. I was like, no, you just have to pay attention. It's there. I'm not doing anything special. It's there for you. So I went around the block to answer your question, but no, I got it the hard way. You know what I'm saying? I really did.
It's nothing about your story, and you're being vulnerable, and I appreciate that. And a lot of people, when they get into these topics, when they start shows like this, or they start speaking the truth and they start spreading the truth, stuff comes after them. I've had the craziest year I've had in my whole life after I started this show. This stuff happened this last year. It's insane. Mm-hmm. And I feel I resonate a lot with what you're saying, because I feel really attacked. When you're talking about being isolated and having your boys, and it's like, I just went through that. My wife left, and we had the tornado blow through the yard. COVID came through, and it's just been one crazy thing after another this last year. And I'm like, is this because we started the show, or is this just coincidence? But it just seems like it's been hell. And man, I can't say how much I relate to what you just said, because it's been insane. And Luke and I are just trying to tell the truth. I mean, we're just trying to get better answers to what this paranormal stuff that happens. People, they see this stuff. We're just trying to give them better answers, and we're trying to point them to God. And like, we're not any better than anybody else, but we're just here. This is what we think it is, and it's just, I can just totally relate what you said. So thanks for being honest with us, and hopefully that encourages somebody out there.
Well, let me say this, because I told you the bad part, but let me tell you how powerful God is. The bad part is bad, but let me tell you the beauty of it. When I came through the end of the test, so this is how bad it was at the end. So at the end, I'm in a house that I'm renting that's going into foreclosure, and I don't have all the money I need to move out. And then overnight, money comes in, $14,000. Just like somebody just dropped it. $14,000 comes in. Overnight, my phone starts ringing with this prophet, like an automated phone call from a prophet leaving me voicemails. And the prophet would say, God is testing you, and your test is almost over, and press 5 if you want to hear more. I was like, okay, I press 5. The first time I press 5, right? Boom. God goes into, you're going to have someone close to you try and betray you, but it's not their fault. They're being manipulated against you. Don't worry about it. Don't take it personally. Boom, 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 boom. 2 days later, somebody would do it. Then the next phone call, it would happen. 2 days later, it would come true. Then the next phone call would happen. And then one phone call was like, God is almost seeing you through what you're going through. He's going to move you now. It's time for you to go. You were supposed to go a long time ago, and you didn't listen, so now he's forcing you. And then all of a sudden, I move into a different place, and life is like completely 180 degrees turned in the opposite direction better, right? So I say that to you to say this. You guys are, when you go through these tests, which is what you guys were describing, you're going through that test because you actually are on a spiritual battlefield. So you really do have spiritual opponents coming after you. And you're in the war. You're in the heat of the war. Some people call it the woo, whatever you want to call it, but you're in a war. People just don't realize it. We've always been in a war since we were born. The difference is you are actively fighting in the war. Some people just laying down, getting their behinds kicked. You're actively fighting. And so there's a reward for that, being in the army, being in the battle. And that's what you need to look forward to, as opposed to the battle, because you've chosen to be in a position. You're going to be in the battle. So now you really need to be communicating to God what you need to help you move forward, and praying for those things and asking for those things so he can deliver them to you, because he will, because you're in the battle. You're in the fight. There's not a lot of us that's in the fight. You know what I'm saying? People pretend to be in the fight, but they ain't in the fight, because when you're doing what we're doing, talking about the topics we're talking about, you're literally staring into the darkness and talking about the darkness. You're telling people what's over there in the dark. And it wakes people up slowly but surely. It wakes people up. And then now, at this time of the quickening, where everything is getting faster, everything is going at an accelerated pace, people are searching for this information more than anything. I said that 3 years ago. I told people, I said, as we go into this next phase, people are going to be searching for this information. They weren't, but now they are. So you guys are in the phenomenal position. It's just, you're going to be tested. Like, I'm pretty sure I got another test coming around the corner, because this is how it works. And we'll see what happens when I get to it.
Yeah. Well, man,
I'm not going to do it out of fear, though.
Right.
I'm going to be the brave man that God made me to be.
That's awesome. Man, thanks so much. Thanks for the encouragement. Thanks for the. I really enjoyed the last part of that, because it's really encouraging. And I think a lot of these shows, they don't leave anyone with any encouraging notes. They don't leave you with any answers. And it's amazing how many emails we get of people like, man, I'm reading my Bible for the first time, or I rededicated my life. Someone said they were stooped in paganism, and they came back to God listening to these shows. And I'm just like listening to our show, and I was just like, wow, when people are confronted with the darkness, they right away, their hearts, they go back to God, because they see how evil this world really is. And it compels them to pick up their Bible again and read it. It's not this guilty book that you've been taught. It's not, this thing is going to save your life. And you just have a new respect for it, and for the stories, and for people who share things that, you thought were unbelievable. Like, I saw this creature. Well, now the more we throw at our audience, the more they can handle, and it's pretty cool. So thanks so much for being vulnerable with us and sharing some stories and coming on our show and encouraging our listeners. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, D-Dub.
Nah, I appreciate you guys, bro. You guys are the bomb. I'm glad you're there. I'm glad we're all in this battle together. Nobody wants to carry a sword by themselves. Right. And, that's why I love doing the interviews and the shows, because especially when you people who go from a godly Christian perspective, like there's not many of us in this field. A lot of people in the cryptid field believe the same thing we believe, but they're afraid and they live in fear, so they don't discuss it. And they'll pay the price for that as well. But I don't want none of that smoke. I'm going to tell it like it is, and it's going to be what it's going to be. The chips are going to fall where they may. You know what I'm saying, brothers?
So thanks so much, man. And thank your fiance for letting us keep you a little longer.
Yeah.
And we'll be in touch. We'll get you back. And thank you for sending over the encounters. And
tell them about your YouTube, too.
Yeah, you want to let everybody know about your spot real quick, and then we can send you out?
Yeah. IamDarkWaters.com is the members website where you can get all the good stories. Then Dark Waters YouTube, just type in Dark Waters Horror Stories on YouTube, and you'll get a lot of the Werewolf Dogman content. Awesome. And then there's Dark Waters Radio, which you can look up on the Paranormal Radio app, which is 24-hour streaming horror content as well.
You're the man.
Fantastic. You're the man.
Have a good
Appreciate
night.
you.
Thanks, all right, Chase. Brothers. God bless y'all. Let me go ahead and get something to eat, and we'll touch base.
Thanks, Chase.
Later.
All right, later.